In this fourth episode of Robot Builders Club, we are doing something different. We're going to Denmark. Well, rather, Aldus from Meili Robotics is coming to us. Aldus is an enigmatic CEO. He started by building a drone company that was delivering beer to festival-going partiers. Sadly, he left that and started a fleet management robotic software company, which has a lot of applications in farms, warehouses, industrial sites. He's talking to customers within the United States, European clientele, as well as those in Asia. He's noticing all of these differences, nuances, trends. All of that is being brought to us today on Robots Builder Club. My name is Ali Afzal. Let's go find out. All right, Aldus, you're giving us your time on a Friday, my morning, your evening. How's your week going? How's Meili Robotics doing? How are you doing?
It's been a good week. Thank you very much for having us, Ali. It's been a productive week. A lot of good starts. It came about this much snow yesterday night in Copenhagen. So, there's a big tidal wave up against my window from my balcony.
Wow. Okay. I don't know if you've been following the news on stateside. Our east coast of the United States got 16 inches in many places. So
Wow.
we got the snow in Texas,
Jesus.
which is usually unheard of. But yeah, that's maybe climate change.
I hope the energy grids can make it this year. They had a problem a couple of years back in Texas, didn't they?
In
The
US?
big freeze. Yeah.
Yeah. Depends on the area. Yeah, that happens. Okay, let's start with your founder arc. You're an experienced founder. You've been around the block. You have battle scars. But let's start with something more fun like Legos. You're coming from the birthplace of Legos. I have played with Legos. Our listeners have played with Legos. How did Legos inspire you? Did that have a role to play in how you thought about things?
More of a bring back to reality, go away from the software side, actually touch something physical. For that, it's being in Denmark and Lego is so easily available, and being an avid Lego fan, it can be quite challenging to resist the urge to buy another set.
Right. And you said you came from hardware. I understand you had a drone company in past, and you pivoted to Meili Robots, which is now a fleet management software company. How has that transition been?
It's been quite exciting. The drone idea initially it was 2018, where a company I used to work for was doing wind energy generation, but with drones that was tethered. But it was very early stage. I wasn't the right fit for the two co-founders. And then, so they planted an idea of, Aldus, you've been talking about drone delivery. Why don't you do beer delivery at music festivals with drones?
Interesting. Okay.
That's a dumb idea. But anyways, a month later, I started a drone delivery company with that kind of gimmick to get attention. But essentially, it was last mile stuff. The regulations is very challenging when it comes to that kind of application. So in 2019, I shut that down and started Meili with the original concept we have, which was last mile delivery with robots, kind of think R2D2s delivering pizzas. But we also discovered then that we were too early. The regulatory parts, like it had to be a vehicle that's type approved by the transport ministry on a federal level. We were an autonomous vehicle, radio controlled, electric, which are all three different types. And there was no one combined. So what happened was that we tried to get a use case to get a permit, couldn't get a permit without a use case. And it was that vicious cycle of that. Towards the end of 2019, my team attended a conference in the Danish healthcare using robots. That was the topic. And they came back and said there was this project that they're doing in one hospital where they're trying to connect one robot from brand A, one robot from brand B on the same platform. And it sounded easy for the project organizers, but the conclusion of the project was there has to be a third party. We cannot use OEM software. So that's how we started looking at it and thinking, well, we're making our platform for the service with the robots that we're going to be doing. Shall we drop that hardware element to it and just focus on the software? And that was the the natural transition towards the direction where we are today.
Oh, that's awesome. You pivoted. You were ahead of your time. The idea was there before the regulatory framework was in place, right? With the prototype. It's a shame that would have liked to have beer come down from a
Yeah.
drone.
Yeah,
What were you
it's
thinking? Like, was it going to be a glass container coming down, uh, or
well,
a pipe comes down and you 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 turn
it's
into a
so the
hummingbird?
so the unit of economics, does one beer can, is that viable economically, or do we do a 6-pack? But then the 6-pack is heavier. What if it was a fun idea, and then we're like, oh, do we do it by a string that can break if someone yanked it, or do we drop a parachute?
I think you should probably go back to that, exploring that idea now that probably regulatory framework is there. There's
Yeah.
something to that. On a serious note, you've worked on drones. Now you're doing fleet management. You've had the experience of going through the hardware problems, and now you're building a software agency, software platform. Are there any problems that followed you across both domains?
You did mention it. We were quite ahead. So the drone delivery and then the robot delivery services, that was very ahead of its time, especially here in Scandinavia, where no one really had thought about it. It all seems very science fiction. So that same challenge of being ahead, of us being a third party fleet manager for multiple brands of robots, was sort of the same, because back then it was very, you're one robot manufacturer, you're already providing the software. Why do we need
Yeah.
a third external? So we did have quite a bit of pushback from the brands back then saying, no, we have our own, we're fine, we don't need you. But the topic of the mixed fleet is something that did started being more discussed on larger platforms or larger stages, especially at conferences, where some of the end customer profiles started saying, if you're not opening up your robots for third-party systems because we're going to combine it all together, we're not going to buy your robots. And that's where the robot OEMs suddenly woke up and was like, a company of that level says this, and we're not going to be able to sell to them anymore if we don't act on their demands. So it took a bit of time for the brands to open up, but now it's a lot more straightforward. And we really position ourselves as being an enabler, not a competitor or a threat to the robot manufacturers.
Yeah, everybody wins when the ecosystem is there to a critical level.
Right.
That's when opportunities open up. So it's I think we're entering that arc now. There's widespread adoption. There is a lot of developments that have taken place in AI where it's becoming physical AI. A lot of it is hype, but there's also a lot of different verticals, different industries, different use cases that robotics is applying to. So your idea of fleet management, walk me through a little bit. What are the applications? What use cases are you seeing? What are some of the problems you have solved for the customers?
Absolutely. The most common use case would be material handling in both a manufacturing site or a warehouse. We usually bundle them together into our own named category of industrial sites. Just make it easy. It's usually the same robots, models, and the application is effectively the same. It's movement of material from A to B. So that's a very common use case where our platform provides the value is if you are utilizing the robot, but you're adding another robot that performs a different application or use case. So we may have the existing fleet, which is moving pallets, but then you have the other robots that might be moving trolleys or a different sort of a payload carrier. Then you're going to start seeing these robots intertwine and interface with each other on the floor. And we, being the platform that combines it, then makes both units aware of each other and start working collaboratively rather than as isolated fleets. Where it also is providing value is if you are a existing site with human-driven, say forklifts, and you are introducing automation, how do you ensure that the robots are aware of the forklifts that are being driven around? That it isn't just a ghost fleet intertwining with an existing. And that's where our system can bridge that gap as well. So the robots are aware, say around this blind corner at an intersection, there is a forklift coming. Okay, it has right away. I'll wait at the intersection and then I'll told I'm free to go.
Got it. So there's all of these rule setting. There's autonomy. There's sensing, the interface for individual robot and how the fleet would work, which is the hardest problem usually to crack.
It can be quite difficult. If you're using a single vendor brand, it's pretty usually quite its own ecosystem. But when it becomes a more mixed and then you're adding other technologies around it, then it can be quite challenging. And the old answer of saying, well, we'll just isolate it or segregate it from each other isn't really as appealing. That's like saying, oh, let's just use this real estate floor space only for this, and then that one only for that. Like a warehouse manager, operator wants to utilize the entire floor to maximize the space usage. But I can also add a addition of that is a lot of the OEM software, in many cases, is built with a lot of regard to their own robots and its own use case, but not to what else is out there. And that doesn't have to be other robots. It can be systems are higher up on the architecture, like a warehouse management system, where you need to be receiving the orders to then allocate to the robots. Once it's done the delivery, send the status back up, so it all knows everything is moving. Or it can be interfacing with IoT devices, such as if a tote has come down to a collection point, that a signal picks up, okay, things can be retrieved now. Our system can then bridge that of saying, we can now retrieve something. The order is ready for pickup. So it automates the entire workflow further than just the carrying part.
Got it. So in other words, the existing robot, if you get it from a hardware manufacturer, robotics manufacturer, they're thinking of it from their use case. Their software is designed for a start and a finish set of scenarios. They would not allow for that integration layer when the workflow goes beyond what their physical device is capable of in many cases. And you're connecting the workflow between different devices, integrating it and allowing for the actual user to combine different systems.
Correct. Yeah. In a lot of cases, our platform can increase the productivity level of the robot. So it's not just what it's spec'd for, but maybe we can stretch it to a little bit more capability, rather than like a lot of it's going to sound very evil towards the software guys at the OEMs, but sometimes they're designing to what they've been told, the specifications, but they haven't been told the full customer expectations. So they're designing it within a smaller framework or
Makes
frame.
sense.
And then when it comes to deployment, it's like, oh yeah, this is great, this works, we're happy with that part, but what about everything else? I was like, oh, and that's where we can bridge that gap.
Could you take a real example to make that scenario real of a robot is only limited to a certain set of tasks by the manufacturer? The software only enables that robot for only a particular use case, and how your fleet management extends the capability, like a real scenario that if somebody's listening, it makes it real for how it happens.
I can use there's two examples that come to mind. The first one being a robot that passes between different halls. And between the halls, there is the automatic gate that's controlled by a device where our system can say, right, you're starting here, you're ending here, you're going past these 2 or 3 gates. And our system would do the opening of the gates between them. When the robot arrives, we can send a signal, okay, please open. I'm through, now you can close, and so on, so on. That was a gap that was missing before. So it was essentially a human had to come, press a button or pull the string to open the gate, which obviously is lost productivity of that person. They have to stop what they're doing to do that. Then the other one would be a case where they're at a line station, or they're packing trolleys with the goods that are coming out of the production, the assembly. And then they want to press a button on the tablet or just a switch of saying, this one is full, retrieve it, and give me a new trolley, an empty trolley to then stock. And we were able to bridge that gap, that rather than them pressing a button and then the light comes on and the person on the other end presses on the robot, go here, just pressing that button automatically sends behind the robot to get the trolley and then assigned another robot to bring a fresh trolley, or the same robot comes with a fresh trolley and then takes the stocked trolley. So small things like that,
Yeah,
but has a larger effect is some of the things that we've really helped out on.
makes sense. Would you say majority of your use cases are industrial warehousing related?
For the most part, yes. They are the largest market share of users as well. So it wouldn't be so surprising naming those. But we do have a lot of traction in getting into the healthcare. So
In the hospitals?
hospitals. So on the back end, back office, it's a lot of the movement in the basement of the heavier goods. But then on the front office, where the patients and a lot of the staff that we see as visitors are, there's these smaller robots now delivering into the patient's rooms, maybe a meal or um, what's it called, the medicine or what they require, what they call for. There's going to be cleaning robots and perhaps also even hospitality robots. You can ask it, I am looking for this section. Could you guide me to it? Of course, follow me kind of thing. But that's a area where we're going to see a lot of activity. And then also in elderly care, the staff has more time to spend with the patients, which obviously is the most important in these facilities. A other use case where we're seeing a bit is in retail. We also bundle a lot of different sectors, hotels such as room service, concierge, baggage handling, cleaning as well, of course, in restaurants from kitchen to table kind of deliveries, shopping centers, a lot of cleaning, airports cleaning as well, but also maybe I order a coffee from the cafe to where I'm sitting by the gate kind of thing. So there's a lot of different things that are coming up.
Yeah.
And then in other places, we also see agriculture. So in greenhouse, outfield kind of robots, maybe doing weeding or even picking or even inspection of the crops, making sure everything is fine. So there's a lot of activity that we are getting involved in where it's very similar types of use cases, but the environment where it's operating is very, very different.
Yeah, makes sense. You're doing staff augmentation, potentially using robots. Anytime you have to guide somebody, anytime you have to move a product through the maze of the warehouse or the airport or hospital, it's the same environment, but a similar type of task. So you can extend. Got it.
Is also providing the visibility, like what's happening with my fleet. So the operators and managers knows this is here is where my robots are. This is what they're doing right now.
Right.
That can be lacking in some cases. So it's good to know where is my units.
Yeah. What does the chessboard look like? Where are the pawns and the horses? Got it. And speaking of that, what breaks first for customers as you go from 1 to 10 and then from 10 to higher numbers of robots?
I think the traffic control is where it gets challenging. So deploying one robot is very straightforward because it's one unit. But where you start scaling the numbers, especially if it's in a more confined space or a very limited width of, say, corridors or aisles, trying to coordinate traffic between that can start becoming very challenging. There's ways to work around it of enforcing some traffic configurations or rules or setting one-way directions, but the robots have their own sensors and they're designed to be safe. So if they're starting to see other things getting very close, it will do its job of trying to avoid that obstacle. But when you start congesting a lot, it can be quite chaotic. It's a bit like with cars and traffic jams. If the highway is empty, it's very easy to flow. But when you start having other traffic, other drivers, you
The rule
become a
here,
lot more
who
alert.
goes first, who has the
Yeah.
right of way, all of those complications come in. No, that's I can see the complexity multiplying as the number of factors add up, robot and non-robot. I guess that becomes the key to success for a deployment, being able to have clarity around that, provide safety, and still maintain productivity, right? So how does that work? How are you for a customer, somebody who's trying to deploy it, let's say in an industrial setting with a lot of different a scale deployment, a lot of different robots? how does that rule setting work? If I'm trying to deploy it in my industrial setting, how do I
Hmm.
to which system to define these rules?
The party that's assigns the installation to the site, which can be in certain cases either the robot manufacturer who has a direct distribution to the end customer. So they would do that setup. They would do the configuration. It usually starts with that they do the mapping of the area using the robots, say a LiDAR scan as an example, and then they would utilize that map. The same process can also be done by the system integrator, who would be contracted to be the installer, but also maintainer of that deployment. On our case, it would be either of those parties. It can be the end customer themselves, but usually they would have an internal team that's specialized or trained to be the technical roboticist, as to say. But in that setup, you would start with the mapping, and then utilizing that map, you then start setting out the parameters. So you set the no entry zones where the robot shouldn't be going in, say emergency exits, as an example. You would set up the start points, end points, stations, and then also the traffic rules. Maybe you're going to be enforcing the one-way directional, the traffic, or bi-directional. So it'll be very early on that you would start implementing this, and then you run the initial tests, see that it's behaving as it should, and then start growing and scaling.
Got it. And what would you say is the biggest gap between what customers are looking for and what actually engineers are building?
That is a fantastic question. Two levels into this. The first one is the customers know their processes. In some cases, they don't know what technology or capabilities are available on the market. So they might look at robotics as a really big multi-million-dollar investment that they need to do, because that's usually the price tag that it traditionally was, say, automotive manufacturing. So they're like, okay, but these robots are only for that application. So there is an element of educating the market, of saying, here's your process, but here's how we can elevate it, enhance it, or improve it, utilizing this and this technology. And the price isn't going to be as high as what they might expect.
And it could be iterative, right? You deploy in phases. You don't have to write that big check right on day one. You can add to your deployment.
Set the foundation and then build upon it. And it's also with the education, they might not know that they can source a robot that can perform the use case that they want admirably, and it's only built for that use case. Say a certain trolley size and type. Okay, now you can get a robot that is that size. It doesn't have to be the large units anymore. On the other side, on the technical or technicians, I did mention it that maybe there isn't the full clarity of what is expected of the customer. So the team that's sitting between their own technical and the customer side only thinks, okay, well, they only want this because this is what our robot's going to perform, without taking the entire scope of, let's say, the tender or the project. And they only provide that smaller envelope of information to their technical, to then they build upon that, deliver upon that, and then they realize, okay, we've only covered a certain percentage of the project requirements because the other part of the project is being supplied by other technology providers, but they have not bridged that. So there can be instances with some technical teams, I'm not going to say ours, of course, but other companies where the technical team has only been told what the customer engagement team has thought was only necessary to know, but then they're lacking the context of the entire deployment and the deployment's objectives and goals.
Yeah, got it. Who ends up being your end customer? Is it the deployment site itself or somebody who deploys it for the customer?
Our customer would be the supplier to the end user. So it's a bit of a deviation and differentiation from other fleet manager providers or software companies, where we provide it as a platform, as a service, so they can buy the licenses and then they host it on their own infrastructure, either their cloud or the end users on premise. But that deployment is under their ownership and their control. What's different from our competitors is the majority of them are still operating as service providers. So they're doing the hosting, the maintenance. They would be the point of contact for support when it comes to the fleet. Well, we're the opposite. We provide that to, say, automation distributors, system integrators, or even the OEMs who have the direct installation or distribution setup. So we don't really provide to the end customer, end user. We can, but we expect them to have an internal integration team that would be competent and technical enough to perform it.
Got it. So let's say I'm a founder that is looking to deploy a beer delivery service, going back to our beer example, and I've come up with a great idea. I'm going to deliver beer on university campuses to different rooms. I'm going to have 10 different robots at any given time to keep the beer flowing. I want to do that for different universities. That actually sounds like a good idea. I don't know if it's being done, but how would I interact
Where do I
with
invest?
you?
In this case, you might be, let's say, you might either be the robot manufacturer, so we can provide you the software, and then we can white label it, so you can sell it as Beer Delivery Bot ABC. I don't know what the name of the company would be.
Yeah.
Let's say Beerbot Inc. And then it could be branded as your own fleet manager, and then you do the deployments. Because in this instance, you are spending a lot of resources building the hardware, and that is very intense. It is challenging. So you can cut down the development time and also the costs by licensing our technology instead. And then you can focus on doing the deployments. The other case might be where, going back to how we were a last mile delivery service, a company where we were in that stage as well. Do we build our own robots, or do we source them from companies that already have proven hardware? That case, you could be considered as a robot as a service, a RaaS. And then you be focusing more on doing the deployments, get the hardware from these guys, you get the software from us, you combine it, and then right now I'm just going to run these beer deliveries through DoorDash or equivalent kind of services. Maybe your own, because you want to ID check, right? The purchaser.
I didn't think about the ID check. Yeah, you spend much more time working with customers and thinking about the whole workflow. I just got to how do I deliver beer without the regulatory piece of it. But that will have to happen.
The demand is there, right? Like that's without question. Like, how do I do the supply?
Yeah. What would you say is the difference in fleet management between indoor applications like warehouse and outdoor fleet, like for example the beer robot?
Yeah, it's quite, I actually had a bit of a wake up possibly a year ago, where I realized a field at a farm has the same layout as a 3PL warehouse or facility. It's aisles, it's rows, it's a confined space. The robots aren't moving freely, obeying the rules, which then I looked further into it. I kind of did a blind test of showing, here's a segment of a warehouse, here's a segment of a strawberry field. Which one is a field, which is a warehouse? And they said, well, they're both warehouses. I'm like, no, they're one of each. And so on the outdoor applications, agricultural is very similar. In a yard movement, let's say a container yard, it can be somewhat identical. It's just the containers are now the elements, and they could be moving. They can be temporary, but they're usually placed in fixed locations across the yard. Then when it comes to the, say, last mile, where orders can be infrequent, let's say the takeaway, someone at this address, more towards the east, has made an order. Okay, cool, I'm going to run that, but they might not make another order until a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now. But then you get another order of someone else more north. Now I have to reroute the streets, reroute the paths. That gets very complex because it's I call it dynamic kind of routing, because it's not consistent by the orders. Like a warehouse is very consistent here to here. Like, what most common places are going to be. But when it's last mile, You're going to have to go down the streets. The streets can be changing. Maybe there's roadworks, which the robot, our system, wouldn't even know. Like maybe some streets are closed because a truck is there unloading and loading for someone who's moving houses or moving address. What happens when there's a lot of people on the pavement? If your robot's going there, do I then take the bike lane? What if there's no bike lane?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of dynamic changes and complexities. So I think the biggest challenge, I think, to your question that you asked is what's the difference is if it's a last mile delivery is very, very difficult. But if it's
Yeah,
in a confined
that makes
space,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah,
If it's in a confined space where you effectively need like a yard of a factory or a distribution center, you do need to have a permit to be in there. So then it's more controlled. And a
yeah.
permit being a person walking on, you can't just walk in. You need to have a pass and safety gear, etc.
It's much more controlled environment when you're talking about the farm or the warehouse, and when you're on the real world with the messy chaos of cars and
Oh yeah,
people and things. That's a different problem to solve, which is why robo taxis and all of these autonomous vehicle, that problem has taken some time. Even Tesla has made progress in that, and now we have Waymo in San Francisco, and there's
yeah,
a lot of different. Rivian is working on making the vehicles fully autonomous, but it's a difficult problem to crack because of the liability, I suppose.
yeah.
That's a big.
It's a lot of the weather effects can change it. So a lot of the self-driving cars at the moment where they're operating is very consistent weather. It's usually sunny, clear, snow. Yeah, it doesn't snow, for example. So it's very manageable in controlled environments, but it's going to be challenging when you go to, say, more Arctic or
Right.
others of climates.
When the visibility gets reduced. And that you make a good point, because even for the robo taxis, they're deploying it in San Francisco, Phoenix, Texas, typically warmer, sunnier areas. Visibility must have a lot to do with it and the sensing piece of
Oh yeah,
it.
absolutely. Yeah, it's when it comes to other parts of the world where the cities are very cramped and old as well, like European cities and
Yeah.
towns, it's very narrow streets.
It's not a
I'm
grid
amazed that some
always.
people can drive. Yeah, exactly. It was built for horses. It wasn't built for cars. And
We
yeah,
need
try and put
autonomous
something on top.
horses. A robotic horse. I don't know if there's a company that's working on that.
I don't know. Surely somewhere. Maybe they get
Yeah.
Silicon Valley money. It's so unique.
Yeah. The Boston Dynamics has that weird shaped, the
Oh, the spots.
four. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was looking for. Yeah. In your experience, what has worked in a demo environment? What has failed in real deployment? Have you seen examples of that?
Ooh, a spicy question. Demos are pretty nice because it's a very controlled situation. And now I'm going to demonstrate the robot going here to there doing this. But when it comes to real, it can suddenly be a unpredictable addition to what the robot should be doing. Like, oh, I want the robot to now do this. And maybe it wasn't built for that. And maybe our system wasn't ready to handle that. So trying to
Yeah.
think of an example. Yeah, it can be. Demo is very sterile, I would say. It's very like, I'm now going to show it do one thing and it's going to do it really well. But when it comes to the real world, when you start
Yeah.
scaling, when you start changing things and trying out new ways,
When
like maybe you're
you're no
trying to cut
longer in
down.
control of the parameters of the constraints. Yeah. Of course, that's when issues arise.
Yeah. So there can be challenges of having a system that, or providing a system that can adapt and like you can do the configurations, but it still would behave in expected parameters. But I mean, people are very creative in trying to figure out new ways to use technology.
Yeah.
We can't, you can't fix everything preemptively.
Right. And speaking of that, let's say there's a founder trying to build a multi-robot system, such as the beer bot. What advice would you give that founder that's looking to build a multi-robot system?
I would say look at the markets first. What you find, if it's relatable or even if it's not as relatable, but close-ish, reach out to those companies that you find and just chat with them and learn what how they're providing or how they're developing, how they're building, how they provide it, what challenges they face as well. What I discovered a little bit too late-ish was that us in the industry do like to talk. We do share ideas. We do share
Mm.
insights. And I was a little bit shy at the beginning, the first 2 years, maybe, of I was thinking, oh, do I reach out to these companies who may be my competitors? What happens if they tell me to get lost? When
Yeah,
in reality, we're really good friends now. We keep in
love it.
touch. We're friends not only on the field but off field. So my advice to new founders is engage with the market before you start developing, because you don't want to start developing for something you think is cool, but no one needs
Mm.
it. No one would ask for it.
Have
That is a bit of
conversations.
yeah, was a bit of a mistake we did, was that we had a huge list of what we thought was cool, like really, really great, like ideas. But then we actually started talking to the market, and then we realized, no, they only want that, which is great because then our scope, like, okay, cool, our development work reduced. But it would have been disheartening of having to then build all this and remove it from the product rather than take the stickies off the board, when we're planning the development process. So my advice is speak with the markets, engage with them, even speak to the end users. Like, what are their expectations? What are their challenges that they're facing?
Mm.
I haven't found really any founder or company that isn't willing to share insights.
That's a great advice. Being fearless, reaching out, talking to potential customers, informing, using them to inform your product decisions, your business decisions. Who were your influences when you were trying to build a drone company? So the hardware space and also the software space.
Yeah.
Who did you reach out to? Who were your main influences?
In the drone space, two companies come to mind. It was 2018. Wow, it was 8 years ago. Trex, a drone manufacturer, does come to mind to memory. They built drones. They did have deployments in Iceland where they were doing last mile delivery. So rather than a delivery driver driving in and out of the fjords, because it's not a very straight coast. So then they can cut down the delivery time by just flying the drone straight across the water of each cove and each bay. And that actually saved a lot of time. They cut down delivery times by 30 minutes. So it was a significant change. The second company that definitely comes to mind, which is still doing an amazing job in that space, is Zipline. They
Yeah.
started off with doing the medicine and blood transportation in Africa, where infrastructure is really challenging, where they cut down 8-hour delivery times to 30 minutes, which is incredible. And
And they
now they
partnered
have,
with Walmart now.
yeah,
Recently, Walmart signed them up. Yeah.
exactly. So they've now gone into the more domestic US delivery with new drone types and designs, which are really interesting. Yeah, that was probably the two that come to mind in the drone era of my days. In the robots phase, 2019, where we were last mile delivery before the pivots, I would say Starship and KiwiBots were the two inspirations. I think KiwiBots, Berkeley-based. Starship is Estonian originally. I think they're now based in Silicon Valley. But they both have two different types of robots, do deliveries. The approach of 6-wheeled or 4-wheeled is quite interesting. It changes as well. The way that they approached it as well. Like, do you build a full tech stack or do you do teleoperation with drivers remotely? Yeah, it was quite interesting. And then we reached out to both of them to be my supplier of the hardware back then, but we did the pivot.
Got
So
it.
yeah, it didn't get that far.
Yeah. Yeah. Being fearless. You don't be shy. Reach out, and things will happen.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears into. You started talking about different use cases in the European space. You're based in Copenhagen.
That's correct.
Strong reputation Denmark has. Design and systems thinking. How much of that is showing up in your product and the company that you're building?
A lot. I feel I should be wearing a turtleneck when I'm talking about design and being based in Denmark.
Actually, I have a turtleneck. I was thinking about wearing it, but I thought it would be too
Yeah.
much on the nose.
No, as you say, design is very Scandinavian and very much so in the Danish culture, I guess is the word for it, ethos to products, like
Yeah.
product design. That absolutely is one of the biggest focuses we had when we started building the platform for purpose as we are. January 2020, we did see other fleet managers, and they were the robot OEMs in-house their own platforms. The robots are great. Like, I have nothing to say about them. They're really capable. They're really solid and sturdy, reliable. But the software, I was shocked that some of them were putting a price on it because the platforms looked like they were for Windows 98, 95, and they were horribly built. But they were built by people who also built the robots, but they were building it in a technical approach and not a user approach. So they created the platform as like, well, it's only going to be used for this, and then ignored. But in reality, you do go back to the platform. You are going to look at it. You're going to be monitoring it. You want to be able to navigate. It should be an experience. It shouldn't be a burden to use it.
Yeah.
I'm really talking from a Danish design perspective now. So it is part of our design ethos is that it should be pleasant to look at. It should be easy to use. Intuitively should know how to navigate through it, how to configure. You're not meant to have all the features or settings thrown at you at once. When you're activating one, it shows the other. For example, if you're going to schedule a mission, then you show, if you click that, then you show, okay, do you want to do it once or do you want to have it repeating? Choose the other one, let's say repeating. Okay, what days and what times? I just gradually show the information you require and not everything at once. And then also make it rounded on the corners, like softer, make it adaptable that you can change the layout if you require it to do. I understand that this icon represents robots. I understand this icon represents the maps page, as an example. So it definitely is part of our approach from the beginning is make it passable for the grandma tests is when you get an older
I like
person
that.
to look at it. And then
Yeah.
it's a saying in Scandinavia, more and more tested. As I get the grandmother to look at it, if she understands what she's looking at, then you've designed it right. We passed that a few times.
I love that. And maybe a lot of it talks to the differences that exist, at least to my mind, between United States, where I'm sitting, and the different European way of looking at life. Oftentimes, and I may be painting with broad strokes and stereotyping a little bit, but America is more about what's the least I need to do to get the job done, more about functionality, not necessarily about form. Oftentimes, even in our architecture, we're boxy. We're about, we need to build this. What do we need to do? It's not necessarily about aesthetics. Oftentimes, design may be overlooked over functionality. What would you say? What is the Nordic approach to engineering that oftentimes you guys get it right, and Silicon Valley is overlooking and is not hitting the mark?
Yeah, it's very topical. So my background being a Swede, I could talk about the Swedish culture where it can move very, very slowly. So decision makers, it's a very cultural thing that is a flat hierarchy that everyone should have an input to a decision making. So a decision maker, let's say a CEO, is like, right, he's convinced, she is convinced, but they want to have assurances from everyone else that is everyone else okay with this? And that can drag on so long. And it can be good for some things, but here we're talking about just a pilot, right? Dude, just make a decision. It's not a multi-billion-dollar deal. It's a small pilot. It's a trial of 4 months. Make a decision. Whereas the Silicon Valley or the American approach, as you say, it's a lot of function. I think there is good, what's the word for it? I mean, it's necessary sometimes. Like you just need to get it out there. You need to get it rolling. Okay, it doesn't work 100%. Why not? All right, let's fix it. Let's do this. There is a great example of why things in China are developed so quickly is if you give a European team or even a Western team a project scope, and then you give a Chinese team a project scope. So you have 1 month to design a robot, design, build, and deploy a robot for, let's say, picking, like moving something from here to here. The Western team will spend 3 weeks of that month designing the robot and spend the last week building it and then testing, and it doesn't work 100%. The Chinese, they will build it from day one. It's not going to work. but they'll keep doing the iterations and
Yeah.
improving it. By the time they get to the third week, they have a robot that is so cheap to manufacture because they've really narrowed it down, and it's doing the operation already. It's in deployment. It's ready to scale. And
Hmm.
that approach, I think, of if we go back to the Scandinavian versus the American approach, that right, we just need to get it rolling. We can polish it as long as we want, but then we're never going to sell. We're never going to deploy. We're never going to get the feedback. But the European approach of it should be done right, it should be done to accordance, it should be compliance, etc. There are good merits to that, but if you get stuck in that, you never get the point
Yeah.
of deployment. I think there needs to be a compromise of the two.
The middle path
Things
somewhere.
should be safe, stable, reliable, but we also need it to. It needs to get out. Like it needs to work.
Yeah. Oh man, you've hit on so many different things, that difference between the Eastern and Western way of doing things, and then within the Western hemisphere, the European and American way of doing things, and finding the right balance, and cultural differences, the way we operate our companies, and how we make decisions. That could be a separate conversation. I think that
Oh, yeah.
would need an hour to unpack, but there's a lot there. But what would you say, working with different customers, working with different countries, what surprised you the most working with partners outside of Denmark?
Definitely cultural differences. In certain regions, it can be very hierarchical that
Hmm.
you'd address the person on the same level as you. So CEO to CEO effectively. And
Yeah.
there is a process or a behavior expectation that you need to do. Of course, everyone should be polite to each other. It is kind of
Okay.
a addressing. If someone's a doctor, you always refer to them as Doctor ABC.
Got it.
Scandinavia.
Bigger egos, is that what you're hinting at, and without stating it?
Don't want to say ego, but yeah, I think some do have the expectations of being addressed to the title.
Yeah.
Well, in Scandinavia, you would call your boss by the first name.
Mm.
It's very so more relaxed. I also find we were talking about the decision making that working with customers outside of Denmark, some can make a decision really quickly, either a yes or no, which is very, very nice to have because then okay, I don't need to spend time or just being straightforward. So I like in the US, it could be very straightforward of I'm interested, I'm not kind of thing. While
Got
in
it.
some other regions, it might be I don't want to offend, so instead I'm going to
Ah,
ghost. Or I want to say yes, but I don't think we're ready yet, but I don't want to say we're not ready yet. And you end up in this sort of limbo. So it's definitely different cultural
yeah.
language barriers as well. That could be a challenge, which is always fun
Right.
when it's the pronunciations of words.
Yeah. You have a very neutral accent, and have you worked a lot with the American clients?
I've got a very big network of friends and yeah,
Got it.
stuff internationally. I haven't lived in Sweden, my home country, for a lot of years. Moved to Denmark in 2016, and yeah, all my colleagues are English speakers. Yeah, it
Got it.
becomes quite
Yeah.
diluted, but next time maybe I can speak with a Swedish accent if it makes you more comfortable.
I love that. Working with the Americans, give me some tea. Give me some things that we are not aware of in US. Is there
Mm.
anything that made you go, "Huh, that's interesting. This is how they operate?" Is there something starkly different about America and American customers?
That's also a very spicy question.
I'm full of spicy questions.
Yeah, very spicy. Yeah, I want to be very careful what I say.
Just say what comes to your mind. It's an open conversation. Nobody's listening to it. My podcast is not reaching thousands of people.
Well, not yet. It's going to be out there. I think the American approach of yeah, we'll give it a test is definitely one that has caught me off guard. I'm willing to invest in a trial. I'm willing to invest in a test. Check this out. Like that. That does catch me off guard after being so used to more regionally or locally that things do take time to process. I think also the States is a bit of a if we take geopolitics and now there is a lot of focus on America made first, like a lot of
Yeah.
reshoring of
America
manufacturing.
first.
Whereas a lot of the technology of automation, some of it cannot be found domestically. So where do you go look? Do you look towards China where it's going to be cheaper, which is also one of the frictions that is occurring, or do I look to the European market? So we're kind of being seen as a option for an industry that is going to see a big boom in the US, while as we might not be an American-made product, it sees as a close enough kind of thing, but we can work with American-made robots. Like, that's not a problem. It'll just be the platform that's operating it. So I think that's quite what's called something I identify when I'm over in the US at the conferences, that it's a lot of, we will choose American suppliers first before we look at anything else. It's like, okay, cool. Well, I know my market. I know my competitors. Here's my card. Just ping me when you're ready to talk. So it's, that's one of the things I do notice that has been a bit of a kind of a surprise.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing. You've been very measured in the words you choose. I want to get you a little bit out of that as we end the podcast. I appreciate you spending almost an hour here.
Pleasure.
Unpacking things and sharing very openly. But when it comes to the cultural side of things and getting to the spicy questions, you want to not offend people, and I completely understand that. But so what I'm gonna do towards the end of this conversation is I'm gonna throw a whole bunch of questions at you really, really fast. Our speed is gonna change, and I want to get your first reaction as it comes.
All right.
You ready? All right. So let's do it. Warhammer or robotics? What punishes overconfidence faster?
Warhammer.
Why?
You make one roll dice wrong or one decision wrong, your entire unit is wiped out.
Love it. What's your favorite Lego set?
Ooh, in collection at the moment, the Porsche 911, a larger version.
Oh, wow. That sounds, I want to see a picture of that.
Absolutely.
What's the best thing about Denmark?
The living standards.
What's the best thing about United States?
Chicken wings, buffalo wings.
Love it. Korea also has amazing chicken wings.
Well, actually, I'll get change NHL games. It's way better.
And okay, you're an NHL fan.
Yeah.
I lived a long time in Canada, so hockey is religion out in Canada. It's hockey and everything else afterwards.
Yeah, you're born on the skates, right?
You come back, yeah. We'll have a separate conversation on that. You come back from 2050. What will you warn us about?
Well, people are talking about the Epstein file, so I don't need to do that. Probably about the humanoid uprising, I guess.
Love it. Speaking of humanoids, what's another buzzword in robotics or a trend that you'd like to retire?
AI Argentic.
Edge or cloud?
Cloud for trials, edge for full deployment.
Speed or predictability?
Ooh, predictability.
Why?
Play it safe.
Very European. You want everybody to be safe.
I'm a type, aren't I?
Indoor fleet or outdoor fleet?
Indoor fleet. A
One
lot
thing
more
in your
control.
life.
Sorry.
Sorry, if finish your thought.
A lot more control of weather conditions and drier.
For all those reasons, being able to control the environment. Yeah. But the chaos of outdoor fleet, that would be an interesting problem to solve too.
One day, when we get there.
One thing in your life that you want robots to help you with?
Yes. I don't know.
We'll come back to it. One thing humans do better than robots?
Compassion.
You know, this is the fourth conversation I'm having. Your experience is showing, because when I spoke to a whole bunch of other founders and CEOs, they paused at that question. They said they had a hard time answering that question.
Interesting.
Love it. If you could ask Optimus Prime one thing, what would you ask?
Does he have car insurance or life insurance?
Love it. Yeah, he probably needs both.
Yeah.
He's a sentient robot. Yeah, awesome. Aldus, sir, it's been a pleasure. Amazing talking to you, connecting with you. I think this would be very valuable to anybody who's building a fleet, who's looking at different applications within industrial robotics, or trying to learn more about Denmark and Sweden. So appreciate your time. Appreciate the opportunity to have you on the podcast.
It was a pleasure being on the podcast, and thank you very much, Ali, for having us.